So this is where we're headed. We're basically going to recreate a dashboard that Tableau provides in the sample with a few changes that I would make. And in order to get started, what I'm going to do is go connect to the Superstore dataset, and I will start with just a blank Tableau workbook for you here. So to get started, I'm in Tableau. I'm going to click Connect to Data, and I'm just going to choose the Save Data Source of Superstore. Now, I did that because it's already kind of nicely packaged up, and the point here is to show your analysis, not how well you know working with data in Tableau. Okay, so there were 3 charts, and I'll kind of flip back and forth between them here. There's essentially this one on top, this scatter plot, and then this other bar chart. And so let's go and just build this scatter plot first, because we already kind of know that. We've already went through that exercise. What we have to do, if you recall, is just double-click profit, double-click sales, drag customer name down to detail. And now what we're going to do is drag profit ratio up to color. It gives us this orange and blue, which works really great for colorblind. But in this case, I want to do red and black because those are kind of the accounting terms. Now notice the scale here is skewed to the negative. So what I want to do so my colors kind of make sense is I'm going to modify this by choosing advanced, choosing negative 0.5, and for the end doing 0.5. This is just a nice little visual presentation thing where now when I hit apply, you'll see that the scale that I'm using here is -50 to 50. It makes sense to people. Granted, the other one may be more kind of analytical and showing variation and little tiny gradations between the color, but in general business practice, that's not exactly how people tend to think of things, and it can be confusing. So I like to have kind of a fixed scale that matches on both sides of that 0 line. Okay, so we essentially have this to start. Let's give it a name. I'll just call it scatter. And we called it sales and profit by customer. So I'll just double click where it says scatter, drag that over and say sales and profit by customer. Hit OK. Everything's set up. We're good to go. All right, now let's flip back. I want to build this top customers by profit because it's one of the easier, simpler things to do. So I'll just double click on the sheet down there, create a new one. I'll just call it bar so I remember which chart I'm looking at. Now for this one, I need customer name and I'll drag it up to rows. So these give me rows in my view here. If I were to drag it to columns, you would essentially have it just going across the top. Very similar to how a pivot table works in Excel, if you're familiar with that. Now, the thing that they did on the Tableau one, the example was show by sales. And for me, that's not actually the most important thing because the profit you make is probably more important depending on how you look at things. And of course, every department can choose to do that however they want. For me, I'm going to drag profit up to columns. And so what that did is that drew these bars for me horizontally, kind of across the top. But because it's a green pill, it's a measure, we get an axis instead of individual columns. So just to pause on that, dimensions, which are blue, are distinct, meaning they give us new marks on a page or new rows on a pivot table, essentially. And the green pills, these are the measures, they don't give us individual new things. They give us a measure. They give us an axis on which we can draw the intersection of those dimensions and those measures. So this is kind of how that construction works there. All right, so I don't want to see anyone that's negative on here because I'm looking for the top customers. So I'm going to right click on profit and say filter, then choose at least and 0. Now you can see anyone that had something negative below 0 is removed, and I will click on the little profit icon on the bottom to sort from top to bottom. Now next, what I want to do is color code this by profit ratio. Thankfully, that's already here in my measures column. I'll just drag that up to color, change this to that similar red to black diverging that I used for the other one so that they match, and I will hit apply. So let's give this a title. I'll double click on bar, say top customers by profit. Good to go. Let me flip back. So we've got that and we've got that. We'll format this a little bit better once we get it on the actual page here. But we've got the two charts there. And there are some filters here. I'll show you that once we get it on the page. And then we have this top one. Now, this top one is a little bit different, and that's why I saved it for last here. But just like before, I'll click New Sheet, which is this little plus icon down on the bottom. And I'll call this KPIs, which are Key Performance Indicators. Now, in order to have multiple measures, because if you can see, we have customer count, profit, profit ratio, and sales. In order to have all of these listed, we could just drag them each up individually, sales, discount, profit, whatever we wanted, to columns, and it would do that. But there is a shortcut here and kind of a neat way to do this that makes it a bit more automated. And that is using these special things called measure names and measure values. And the best way to understand how this works is just to see it in action. So if you recall on our example, we're looking at the sales region here. So that's our rows. If you can see, it created a row for each one of these. Makes sense, right? So let's drag region up to rows. Okay, we've got that. Simple enough. Now, these are measures: profit, customer count, profit ratio. So these need to go on columns, but instead of the value that's being contained in the measure, we want the name of the measure. So I'll drag measure names up to columns, and currently it says there are no measure values because you need the actual other field here, measure value. So these two things are generally tied together. I'll drag that up to rows. You can see now essentially for every measure on this measure values card, which is new, I have a different bar chart. So I don't want these to be vertical. I want it to be horizontal. So I'll just move that up to columns, and you can see we're getting closer to our result. I don't care about discount here. Number of records is number of orders. So I can go ahead and rename this if I want, say edit alias, say order count. We have profit, profit ratio, quantity is the quantity ordered, and sales. Let's drag sales first, sales, then profit ratio. So it's kind of like flowing from big to little numbers in terms of the relationship there. And let's put order count at the very bottom here. So it's kind of off to the right. I think this is actually a new addition. I didn't have that in the original one. Yeah, I didn't even have that. So we got some new stuff for you here. See, we're ad-libbing and making it on the fly, that visual exploration, exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so there's a lot more to be done here, but most of it is going to be on the formatting side. Let's go ahead and create a dashboard now and talk about what that is real briefly. To create a dashboard, what we need to do is next to the Create New Sheet button on the bottom, there's a new dashboard button. And when I click that, you see we get a whole new interface, and we have these sheets on the left. Those were the things we just created. So really, when you think about a dashboard, it is a single page that is focused in a single area, answers 1 to maybe 3 or 4 key questions, and it does so using different visual forms. So basically several charts mashed up all in the same context to help people understand something that's going on. All right, so let's just drag these over. And as I drag them, you'll see what happens. So it drew it on the page. That looks great, looks beautiful. It added this color legend, which is nice because that helps us understand what these colors are. Then if I want to drag this one on, I just click and drag it. And you see, as I do so, it's telling me where it's going to put it based on where I drag. So I can just kind of drag these around wherever I want and then just kind of drop it when I'm ready to. So you can see there what I did is I just put it right next to the other one, and it kind of split these two panes. Let me change the size here real quick. We're on a fixed size, and this is a desktop browser. This is by default. I'm going to go to, let's say, letter landscape. And now I want to drag on my KPIs. And if you recall, those were on the very top. Again, as I drag this, it has these different panes. It's trying to be really smart about it. And honestly, this is so much better than it used to be. But what I'm going to do is just drag it to the top there. And so now it's all laid out kind of with the KPIs on top and these guys down here. But of course, we're not done and this looks kind of bad. So I'm just going to click and drag until it's right, until it's where I want it to be. I'll go ahead and rename this title here called Customer Analysis. Then these aren't really formatted that well. I'm going to, in fact, go back and just right click here, choose Format. And I can change a lot of these things individually, or a shortcut now in this version of Tableau and going forward is clicking on the format menu and choosing workbook. And I can format basically certain elements of every sheet in the workbook at the same time. So under worksheets, I'm going to click on that and I'm going to go down to 12 for the font. And boom, you can see all of these charts updated. Now I could bold it if I want to as well. I think that's a little bit much, but actually it doesn't look bad. Let's go ahead and leave it for now. Okay, so now notice that these things aren't fitting on the page. Well, what I can do is I can just click and drag that down. I also want to format this one quite a bit more. So let's dive back in here and actually do some more formatting. So when I click on one of these sheets, I get this little pop-up on the right that lets me do a few different things. And the one I want here is called Go to Sheet. I'll hop back here in the design of this given sheet. What I want to do, if you recall how we had it laid out in the example, was that bottom axis was gone and the individual numbers were being listed there. So I can simply right click where it says value and uncheck show header. What that means is the axes for this measure, because remember we have these two measures here, the measure values, measure names, will just go away. Tink, bye-bye. But now, if I'm a user looking at this, I don't have a clue what these numbers are. I just see these bars. So let me just also go ahead and click and drag this a little bit to make its size. And you can, of course, adjust that as much as you want. I don't really need the region here. I can gather that based on the labels themselves. So I'll right click on this and say hide field label for rows. And then I can also play with some more stuff. But what I want to do now is actually put the labels on here so I can see these numbers. So I'll go on the marks card because what we're doing is affecting marks. Click on label and click show mark labels. And like that, I have them all. And because these data types were already predefined, it knows how to display them. For example, currency versus a percentage. And so these numbers are very well kind of set up because our data was already prepackaged for us. So if you were doing this from scratch and you had connected to that Excel sheet, you would need to go specify under these values here exactly how they are supposed to be formatted. So you would do so by right-clicking on them, going default properties, number format. And then you can see currency is listed here with 0 decimal places. For example, if I wanted to change that to thousands, because that's what I'm looking at here, I can just change that, hit OK, and you can see how it just automatically adjusted. I could do so for other ones, et cetera, et cetera. So however you want to do this, feel free. This is just mostly an exercise to show you how to get there and kind of all these options here. So another thing I don't like about this are all these lines that are extra here. I'm really trying to clean this up. I'm going to right click sort of in this space here and choose format. That typically is a great way in Tableau to format the specific thing you're interested in versus trying to find it in one of the menus. So on here, I'll click on this little borders thing and then I can remove that level. So cool, that removed it from there. Then I want to go through, I don't want basically any of these lines. You may want them, you can keep them. But for me, I'm going to click on the lines here, remove grid lines, beautiful. As well as I don't want any other basic stuff going on here. I don't want the 0 line. I don't want any of that stuff going on. So let me go back to columns, rows. Okay, all good. So this looks really clean now. The only thing left are the row dividers. I'll click none there. And you can see that, oh, and then column dividers as well. I don't want any of that. Cool. All right, so this is really clean now. Let me make these titles just a smidge bigger if I can. Maybe not. Let me go back to the dashboard. There you go. So I can also click here, and right now this is fitting standard. This is kind of just how Tableau sizes these elements. I can change that to entire view, and it will essentially fit whatever I give it, which is nice because then I can kind of adjust things, and it'll respond to whatever I do, which is nice. Okay. In fact, let me just shrink that up just a smidge because it's a little too big. All right, so you have all these KPIs on top. They're all very well laid out. You have your top customers by profit. These are a little bit bunched together. Let me just click and drag that down. There you go. Probably don't care about people on the very bottom of that list. And next we need to add some filters. Also, while we're here, let's remove customer name by right-clicking and saying hide field labels for row. We know who they are because the title identifies them as customers. So to get filters, I'm going to jump to any one of these sheets because what we want this to do is to essentially apply to everything. So if I choose one of these options, it will filter all the data, not just one specific view, which is an option. So I go back to a sheet, I find the data source that's already there. I say show filter. And now on the right, it listed it for me. I also want to do this on product category, right click, show filter. I've got that. And we haven't thought about it or even talked about it yet, but this data is for all time. It's not just for one specific date period. So I'm going to drag order date over to filters as well. Choose years, say all, and then show filter. That's kind of the longer way of going to it. But now we have essentially all these filters. And if we only left them here, when we chose these, they would only affect this view. They wouldn't affect any of the other visualizations on our dashboard. So in order to do that, we need to go back to our bar chart, which has them. Click on the dropdown, choose apply to worksheets, and say all using this data source. There are other options here as you get more advanced with this. You can choose specific data sources or specific worksheets or just the worksheet you're looking at. So here, because I'm going to show these and I want the user to pick them, I'm just going to change all of these to filter all sheets using this data source. Now I'll go back to the dashboard and they're not there. So what I have to do is click on one of these sheets, and then up here is your little guy that will help you anytime you're missing anything from your dashboard. So you click on that and you need to add, color legends or filters or highlighters or parameters, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll go here, I'll choose category. It already knew where to put it. Beautiful. Filters, what was the other one? It was year. And then the last one was for segment. Okay. Oops. For segment. That was not right. Undo. Let's go segment is the one. Okay, cool. So I have all of my filters here, but I want to kind of rearrange these, right? And this is where Tableau is really kind of fun and nice. So first off, year, let's make this a drop down. So I'll click on this little caret here and you see I get all these choices of what I want to do. And for this, I could make it a slider. It's kind of a neat thing. You can kind of go year by year, something like that. It's not a bad idea. Or you can make it a drop down. I'll leave it to you. I'll leave it here because when it's year of order date, it's kind of nice that it just it's listed the year there. And then I'll drag profit ratio down to the bottom. That way it's kind of out of the way. Still there, but just not as visible. And then these guys, I'll just leave category and segment selected. So the idea is now when a user comes here, it'll automatically, this is kind of their filter area, the interactive part. They don't want to see furniture, let's say. I can uncheck that and look, now we're seeing essentially all those same data, all those same things, just without furniture. If I want to filter out technology and office supplies, just look at furniture. Wow, a lot of these are very negative on the profit ratio. That's probably not a good thing. But you can get the sense here of just how easy it is. We just had a few clicks and we created something that's highly interactive that will let the people running this part of the business dive into some very granular details here, which is really kind of the point, is this is an exploratory dashboard that they can use to navigate the data, and you've done it in a way that makes it easy and very friendly for them to consume.